input, things which are not said in the text, was supposed that we know them, that our encyclopedic competence was provided with this knowledge, so we were able to reconstruct the whole thing and to bring it to a positive end. In case our encyclopedic competence was not the same as the reader model, the expectations of the author for his reader was not fulfilled, then the communication was not working. According to me, one of the major transformations with the new generation's attitude toward knowledge is exactly in the way this encyclopedic competence is formed. In the whole theory of Umberto Eco, the encyclopedic competence is formed through the reading, through the print culture, through somehow systematic acquisition of knowledge, which help us to have an overall view about the, in certain field of knowledge, you acquire kind of systematic overall picture, general framework, and then thanks to this picture and thanks to the inference, which is another very important notion by Umberto Eco, you reconstruct meanings which the author presupposes you have in your mind. So from the reader was requested a lot of work. Nowadays, seems, and those were my semiotic observations, the way young people construct their encyclopedic competence was not anymore with acquiring this organized knowledge covering certain field and giving rise to important inferences. Now, more and more, according to me, according to my initial observations, young people were gathering into their mind, into their memory, procedures how to obtain the knowledge which is out there. So, instead of writing something, trying to get the notions, to construct the whole inside the mind, and then eventually get external information just to fill the structure which was created as an initial task, as what the professor was requiring, and then the answer should have been formed in the mind of the student with certain structure, with certain general view, and then his own encyclopedic competence or sources from outside, like internet, would have been only of some help. But now I saw that actually it was entirely related to these external sources, and what were the students good to do was much more obtaining this information. So their competence from erudition was transforming gradually, if we want to use Umberto Eco's terms, into a procedural, into a elaborative competence, into a competence of navigation, competence of ease in achieving every necessary information, but not keeping this information in mind. This sounds quite logical, that our mind probably works in this way. It's very economizing entity, our mind. Okay, but the semiotic model helped me to put this into a theory. Okay, so to summarize this, Umberto Eco's model necessary to explain how interpretation works. One of the elements of this model of interpretation is how the reader, the ideal reader, is supposed to know, to keep in his mind certain portion of encyclopedic competence, and thanks to this encyclopedic competence, the communication between the author and the reader is very cooperative, and actually the end result, the final result of interpretation, is kind of mutual effort by the author and by the author and the reader, figuratively speaking. Eco says the text is a lazy machine, and this machine requests the active work of the reader in order to achieve the communicative goal. Okay, newer generation participation in the textual interpretation was a bit different from that. The mechanism through which the reader, the in my case, it was not a reader model, but it was kind of, the student had to fulfill certain tasks, and for this task, his encyclopedic competence was put into exam. So it is more or less the same, a bit more difficult task for it, but the general, how to say, general mechanism was always the same. So I observed that the new generation, these students, after a certain time of the affirmation of internet, after a few years, this was in the early years 2000, students were already then, and even much more now, reluctant in writing flowing text. I mean, writing text which was coherent, which was making sense from the beginning to the end, which was kind of one project putting in action certain portion of encyclopedia, rather than students were looking very, how to say, mechanically the title of the assignment, ignoring the whole study material, the theory they were supposed to study. They were ignoring this. On the other hand, they were extremely good in finding any possible reference to the text, the topic I was asking from them. So at the end, I got kind of bricolage by all these elements. So getting into deeper into Eco's model, but also, getting deeper into Eco's model, we realize that this transformation from the structured culture, hierarchical culture, towards the rhizomatic type of culture, this was something natural, and in order to look for evidence out there for this, in my article I'm comparing, now this is the second phase, to understand better how evolved information provided by internet. Now this is the second important notion. Yet from Umberto Eco we get the model that interpretation is always collaboration, and that the encyclopedic competence of the reader matters. So the task of university was to provide this encyclopedic competence for any use of interpretation of text. Okay, but what was going on in internet? Actually, it is very obvious how in the first phase of internet, search engines were very much were organized very much like this hierarchical structure of knowledge. Somehow, if you remember Yahoo was organized by categories. I mean, in the early stages of the development of internet, kind of curiosity was the main reason for navigating. And if we quote one of the authors, and I think the founder of Yahoo, he was saying, okay, at this initial phase it was interesting for people what was out there. What was out there, just to find out. Very similar to the way Aristotle was making the first attempts in the Western culture to find out an order and to describe the external world into in a systematic way. In the same way, Yahoo, according to this very raw opposition, Yahoo was putting into categories, so the eventual reader, the navigator into the internet, was acquired then from the very beginning of a kind of categorical division, which was going from the more general to the more concrete. And the search engine was organized exactly in this way. So you had half of the work done already seeing various categories, and categories were like arts, business and economy, computers and internet, education, entertainment, government, health, news, recreation and sports, regional, science, and so on. Whereas the advent of Google was exactly the affirmation of the rhizomatic model. It was this shift which in the theory of Umberto Eco was described as representing the contemporary situation of culture. In the logic of the development of search engines, this, as we have seen, this extension of the mind work, this extension of the mental capacities now, they were also transforming from an early stage of hierarchical representation, what is out there in the internet, to a system through an approach, the page ranking system of Google, which made their fortune, which made it the most important thing in internet, which was totally based on the principles rhizoma, of this rhizomatic model